All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. Ranked tier list is what we're doing today. I was going to do an updated tier list video on Tuesday, but I wasn't feeling very well, so I didn't upload a video. And yesterday, I did my best decks for ranked battles. And today, I figured, why not just throw every single meta deck that is competitively viable in the game right now? And by the way, there are quite a few onto the tier list maker, and we're just going to rank. We're going to rank these decks. Kind of an updated tier list from last Tuesday when we did our initial tier list. So this should be, again, like a tier list that is relevant to the greater scope of the metagame. I'm probably going to call it ranked battles tier list because ranked is out right now. But as I tell you guys, virtually all of the time, the tournament metagame does almost entirely reflect the ranked metagame. And I know some people argue differently. They are different, but the decks that people play and the viability of those decks are basically the same. So that's what this is. It's an updated tier list. It's a ranked tier list. Lots of decks, even more than the last video tier list that we did this season. This season's crazy, and there has been a lot of meta changes since the last time we did these rankings. So I figure, you know what? Let's just dive into it. I think I removed a couple of decks from the last tier list, but I added a bunch more because, again, so many different decks are seeing play right now, and a lot of things that I really do want to mention, okay? So we're going to dive right into it. Hopefully this goes a bit quicker than we typically would, and I know I always say that, but I'm going to try to do this like legitimately quickly. What we're going to do here is pop on over to Limitless, and we're going to take a look at the entire kind of data of the entire season here. That way we can kind of get a greater scope of these deck lists and which ones I think are the best, and I'll pull up an example here from Limitless. By the way, go register for PMPT number 42 this weekend. It's this Saturday, August 15th at noon Eastern time. Link to register down in the description below. But yeah, that's kind of that's the move here. We're going to go back and forth between Limitless to pull up the deck list, the tier list maker, and that way I don't have to edit all of the deck lists in post. All right, we're 2 minutes in. We got to go. We got to start going here. All right, the first deck list is going to be Sleep Altaria. And again, this is in no particular order of which we're categorizing these decks, probably alphabetical. I always say I have no idea how these are ordered. Sleep Altaria, let's do it. So Sleep Altaria, and I'll zoom in here so it's a bit easier to see. Sleep Altaria is the 9th most played deck this season. In fact, it is the most popular Psychic type deck, and I do think that it's still very good, and I think it's about as good as I kind of assumed it would be last time we did the tier list. Now, Sleep Altaria continues to be kind of a top tier deck, probably a top 10 deck, I would say, floating anywhere between 10 to 5th in terms of popularity and overall meta viability, which I think is a really appropriate place for Sleep Altaria. I would say the biggest story of the season so far, and at this point right now, is fighting type. It is Mega Lucario, and as we know, Sleep Altaria can do pretty well into Mega Lucario, and I think that's a big upside for this particular deck list. So you know what? And the win rate here, if we go back, is pretty consistent. I mean, it's 52%, which is really solid, right? So, I mean, this is definitely a super strong deck. Honestly, one of those decks that is kind of fringe, high A tier, S tier, but again, we're always pretty selective with the decks we put in S tier, so high A tier is where Sleep Altaria is going to go. I think Psychic has a pretty high benefit. Also, not a lot of people counterplaying status conditions or sleep with things like Ogerpon and whatnot. PCL is still pretty common, though. So, Sleep Altaria, high A tier. Next up is going to be the Ancient Dragon Toolbox deck, which was definitely a really cool deck that popped up kind of somewhat later into the season. By that, I mean like a couple of days, maybe a week or so after the season got, maybe not, maybe it was just a couple of days. Definitely not a deck I would say that has taken the metagame by storm. Currently, right now, it's sitting as the 24th most played archetype of the season. Limitless does categorize it as Dragonite EX and Walking Wake, as we see right here. And it does have about a 44% win rate. So again, nothing too substantial. However, it is a really cool deck, right? So there's definitely swag points here. When you're playing in ranked battles, there's no shortage of options that you can definitely climb with, right? So I know a lot of people are going to comment, they're going to be like, oh, I hit like top 1000 playing like Mega Blastoise or whatever. And that's because Mega Blastoise is actually quite a strong card. There's so many strong decks in Pokemon Pocket. This is certainly like one of them, right? Like you're going to lose to this. Playing against all of the other top tier meta decks and winning 45% of the time does relatively mean this deck isn't as good, but it doesn't mean that this is a weak deck list, one that you could certainly climb with. I like this. It's got some merit to it. Lots of 1-hit KO potential. Dragonite EX, Raging Bolt can 1-hit KO like crazy. Still a lot going on here, lots of moving pieces. It's just not the most consistent deck in the world, but definitely a massive buff to the Ancient Dragon type kind of archetype that we got this season, right? With Rainbow Cave, being able to pair that with Dragonair and Professor Sada. You still have Ancient Booster Capsule. It's a really fun deck, one that I do like. I do like this deck, but again, I cannot stand here and tell you that it's something that I would recommend for grinding or competing in Pokemon Pocket to the most effective way, right? In the most effectiveness. So we're going to be putting this C tier. I think this is just a very solid, C tier deck. Some people might be mad about my placements, but we're moving quickly. No time to apologize for my rankings. But next up is going to be Ampharos Greninja, which was something I probably should have removed from the tier list, quite frankly, because I just don't think this is something that a lot of people are playing, and it's probably not even close to like some of the most played decks. But the thing is, early on the season, and it's the 56th most played deck, so again, only 19 people have played it, 39.45. It did get 17th place at a recent tournament here, the Dankest Cup. However, keep in mind, this is a deck that I think that realistically kind of had a couple of decent placements early on the season, but really just wasn't something that was that competitive, which is why it's on the tier list. And again, some people have played it this season, but it's really not something that anyone is considering at this point in time. So again, I'm not going to completely remove it from the tier list, but we will kind of adjust our rankings for it, and we're going to talk about it because I want to update you guys. So here's the list, and again, you're not terrible. It's just Ampharos EX has never been that strong of a card, and they're just stronger options. Greninja is pretty strong, but Lightning has definitely gone a certain direction, and at this point, I don't really think that Ampharos is that direction. Now, if we go back to, I want to go back to the win rate here because I am curious. It's about a 45% win rate. So again, I mean, it's definitely one of those decks. It's one of the decks of all time. We're going to put this C tier. I'm actually going to put it below it, Ancient Dragon Box, because I think it's just, again, it's a deck list that can win. I just don't feel that strongly about it. Next up, though, let's talk about Mega Blaziken. Mega Blaziken, I only have categorized really one way here, which is still with Greninja. I know that recently, and as the weekly wildcard in the video the other day, I did mention the Skeledirge version of Blaziken, which I believe was still playing Greninja. So to be fair, at the end of the day, Blaziken Greninja is still like Blaziken and Greninja, even though there might be some interesting tech. I really don't hate it. There was a time where Grass was a bit more popular, but as you see, these are the most played decks this season. Sceptile still seeing a bit of play. Vespiquen certainly seeing a lot of play still. Very successful. Blaziken isn't even the most played Fire-type deck this season. In fact, that goes to Mega Charizard. And again, in Ranked, I find that to be interesting because, when you play Ranked battles, I literally guarantee you're going to see more Mega Charizard than you will Mega Blaziken, which is pretty funny. Fire-type needs something, and I don't know what it is. Maybe they need like a Fire-type specific stadium. We still have Flame Patch. Now we have Rainbow Cave. To me, it just feels like the Fire-type stuff is a little bit left behind. There aren't that many strong Fire-type Pokemon, and I know I'm going to get a million comments about what about Houndoom? Should I rate Houndoom? Listen, it's been out for like a day, so we don't have enough data. It's hard for me to put it on the tier list, so I'm not including Houndoom. But anyway, Mega Blaziken, which again has had some placements a little bit last week, right? So August 8th, August 7th, and August 8th again, some pretty decent placements, but most of these are early on in the season. Again, just not something that I really consider to be that relevant in the greater scheme of the metagame. There's so many strong decks that we need to talk about. Blaziken to me, definitely fine. I'm sorry, we do not have any codes, QR codes, because we're not on PocketMads.com. But if you wanted to go ahead and pull up, and find examples of these decks with QR codes, you can just go to PocketMads.com and do it. Shout out to PocketMads.com. Link down in the description below. I really like Blaziken. I do. I can't consider this to be like a legitimate top tier, potential Pokemon. Again, just sub 50% win rate, which effectively means it's about a 50-50, maybe a little below. I think B tier is a great fine placement for Blaziken. And honestly, anything fire type right now feels very B tier to me. That's just sort of how we feel. But next up is going to be Mega Rayquaza with Drampa. So this is an interesting thing, right? If we take a look at the metagame data, we do have 3 different Mega Rayquaza decks on here because that's really the way that people play Mega Rayquaza. But you'll notice that by far, and I mean like by far the most popular way to play Mega Rayquaza is with Gouging Fire, which is a very respectable deck list, and that's up here as the 4th most played deck this season with about a 51% win rate. But if we go down to Dragonair in Mega Rayquaza, this is going to be the version, I believe, with Drampa. Now, again, no real recent placements, to be fair. August 7th, or August 10th down here got 11th place out of 135 players, but just not a lot of recent placements for this deck list. And again, that's because early on in the season, people were playing Mega Rayquaza lots of different ways. But this is just a deck list that has fallen to the wayside in favor of Gouging Fire. I would say right now that Mega Rayquaza is sort of just defined as the Gouging Fire version, which is a little bit tough, but deck lists always become standardized. However, sometimes the opposite happens, which we will talk about other archetypes this season so far. So here's Drampa Mega Rayquaza. Again, not a terrible deck list, just one that I really wouldn't play over Gouging Fire. It does have its benefits. Basically, if you hit Gouging Fire, you're going to struggle. But the fact that we have 2 energy attack cost, and of course, like, it's an easier deck to get going. Maybe like you can kind of attack a turn earlier. That extra pacing and in kind of ease of consistency to get Drampa set up is a big upside. It's just unfortunately that 100 HP means that if you do hit Gouging Fire, you're going to struggle, which is why the Gouging Fire version ended up being more popular this season, because it just won the mirror matchup into other Mega Rayquaza decks. But again, a very solid deck list, and one that I oftentimes feel like I probably want to play more than Gouging Fire, but I know that if I hit Gouging Fire, it's not going to go very well for me, right? Which is always kind of a tough part. So to be fair, I'm going to put Mega Rayquaza and Drampa kind of right next to Blaziken. I'm actually going to put it, just below Blaziken. Again, a very, very fine deck. Any decks on the tier list today that are B tier or above, you could easily climb with. You could easily make it to top 1,000 with anything B tier or above. It's just about sort of the optimal deck to play and how many games it will take you, right? And again, some people get lucky, some people don't, but I'm just trying to give you guys the best odds to climb for ranked or win tournaments. And again, Blaziken is a deck that certainly can win tournaments. So can Drampa Rayquaza. It's just not something that I really think I would be picking, right? All right, and that's why they're going B tier, honestly. Next up, though, is going to be a new inclusion, which is Chandelure and Oricorio, which to me is my favorite new deck this season. This deck is awesome. It's actually the deck that I've been playing the most in ranked battles with, and it's rising in popularity. If we go down currently, it's a deck that popped up just a couple of days ago, but it's already the 34th most played deck this season, and it has a 104 to 85 record, which is very impressive for a deck like this. And look at all of these recent placements. These are all within the last couple of days, which is really impressive for a deck like this. I'm really interested to see how it does at PMPT 42 this weekend. Let's pull up a first place example here. A couple of grand finals finishes, which is really cool. Now, this version is playing Bonsly, but I have been also testing Why Not in place of Bonsly, both very useful new baby Pokemon. Keep in mind, though, I do think Bonsly in general is better. They both do similar things. So Bonsly's going to reduce the damage that the Pokemon you're attacking does by 30, which is really nice because it can lead into Chandelure if your opponent, of course, tries to Sabrina you or Cyrus you or whatever. And that's going to allow you to live more hits from Chandelure. But what it also does is allow you to kind of get some valuable turn 1 chip damage off without getting revenge KO'd. It's actually pretty nice into things like Hoopa. I personally like Why Not as well. And it's also a psychic type Pokemon. Not that matters, but it kind of thematically fits a little bit better. To me, the big story about Chandelure is that it's just really, really good with that new Oricorio. This new Oricorio card is absolutely phenomenal, even though the spacing on the attack is really strange. I don't know why the words are so far over on this card. Has anyone noticed that? I feel like this is a mistake. Maybe they should fix this. But 50 damage, and you get to discard a card with 80 HP, which is a really big deal because you want supporter cards in your discard pile. When I'm playing Chandelure, I find myself being able to hit for 140, 160, sometimes 180 damage by my 3rd or 4th turn almost every game. You're a purely single prize archetype, tons of early chip damage with Oricorio, early pacing. You can KO those 50 HP basics. You can KO those Riolus in the active spot. A phenomenal deck, one that is very well positioned into almost everything that I end up playing, other sometimes than things like Vespiquen if they're going second, because they can just sort of outpace you and want to KO Chandelure. And of course, Hoopa, right? But the Hoopa matchup really isn't even that bad, especially with Bonsly. But if you do go first against Hoopa, it never feels good, especially if you lead Litwick, right? So this is a deck that certainly has its downsides in terms of, leading the right Pokemon going first or second. But in general, this is a deck that can compete with really any of the top tier meta decks, and I find that incredibly interesting. So to me, this is kind of the biggest news story here. And again, my experience with ranked playing this deck list is that it's really phenomenal. I really like this deck. This is going A tier for me. And honestly, it's probably going to be right here tied with Sleep Altaria. But you know what? We don't like Sleep Altaria. So I'm going to put it above Sleep Altaria, mostly because it's much more ethical. And it is definitely less cheap, I guess. There's no coin flips here when you're playing Chandelure. It's all just run and gun. Just purely ethical psychic type deck. I love Chandelure. Again, it's probably maybe not better. I mean, win rate wise, it's pretty close, but in general, like if I had to play a psychic type deck right now, this is what I'm playing, and it's very, very good, especially in a very fighting dominant metagame, which is interesting. So Chandelure, it's going to go high A tier. It's really, really good. I'm not don't sleep on this. Did you see those results? Did you see the results here? Look at the last week of Chandelure. Look at this. Incredible placements all across the board. Multiple grand finals finishes. Incredibly high win rate, almost 53%. Above 53% if you discount the ties. So very, very impressive. Next up, though, is going to be Koraidon, Great Tusk. If you guys remember, I love Great Tusk. It's one of my favorite things really of all time. However, you know, as we know, Mega Lucario is definitely one of the strongest things in the entire game right now. So anything that's not Mega Lucario, but is a fighting type, unfortunately, just maybe isn't that, I guess, looked at as that significant. But keep in mind, this is certainly not a bad deck, and it's really funny. And it's actually seeing a bit of play this season. Again, the 26th most played archetype, and it has just above a 50% win rate, technically, 110 to 109, which is hilarious. And that just goes to show that this is not a bad deck whatsoever. Here's a third place finish the other day. Definitely not a bad deck whatsoever. Very, very similar to other decks that we've seen. But now, of course, we do have Rainbow Cave, right? So we have Rainbow Cave Sada, which is definitely kind of crazy in the way that you can actually kind of turbo your Great Tusk going first, which I love. I really do love it. And the synergy with Furfrou and Koraidon makes this certainly kind of an upgraded archetype. This is one of the stronger decks in the game, relatively speaking, right? It's a top 20 deck, which is hilarious to me. I love Great Tusk. One of my favorite things in the entire game. And again, people are playing it. And again, the Rainbow Cave Sada stuff ends up being really relevant for a lot of Pokemon. Maybe something that we should be looking at more so for other ancient Pokemon. I know the other ancients aren't really that good. People are playing the ancient dragons, of course. We have Great Tusk. I forget what the other ancients are, but we do have some other ones. Maybe we could try them out. I don't know. Probably not that relevant. But yeah, no, it's a deck list I really like, and one that I feel like we need to rank. Definitely respectfully, about a 50% win rate. There are other better fighting type decks. In fact, basically everything else on this tier list fighting type is better than this, but it's definitely not bad. I'm putting it above Blaziken, which is hilarious. I'm actually going to put it right between. Honestly, it's a super solid B tier deck, and I find that hilarious. So I had to include it. Again, it's one of the top 30 most played decks this season. Very respectable. Next up is Hydreigon. Hydreigon. Hydreigon is a deck. What's crazy to me is the impact that Hydreigon has had on the metagame this season is very, very little. Just about 2% of decks are playing Hydreigon. I haven't seen it a single time on the ranked ladder, which is unbelievable, but that's where we're at. Power creep is crazy. The 12th most played deck, it's got a 47% win rate. Has it done anything? Not really. Most of these results are early on this season. Here's a recent example. Now, again, Dark was buffed. We do have Deceptive Needle, but keep in mind, you know, Hoopa EX is broken, and it's what everyone's playing right now. In fact, I still think Zoroark is actually better than Hydreigon, but honestly, the pure Hoopa archetypes, whether it's Greninja or just Dark Hoopa, are probably the best Dark type decks in the game right now. Really, really strong Hoopa is, and we're going to talk about that. Hydreigon, it's a deck list, still solid, but again, I really don't feel that strongly about it. Not a great win rate this season. You know what? I'm going to be putting it C tier. I'm going to be putting it high C tier, and the reason I'm putting it C tier is because so many other strong decks are Dark type, and they're all better than Hoopa, so we're going to keep that in the C tier, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to put Hydreigon C tier. I apologize. Honestly, a lot of the top decks right now are a little bit more skill focused, which is quite interesting. But anyway, Hydreigon C tier. Never thought I'd say that, but really just not an impactful deck this season. It's going to continue to go down in play rate. Yes, it's probably fine for ranked, but again, I don't feel like I would want to play Hydreigon into the current metagame. Lots of grass, lots of Vespiquen, you know, lots of Mega Lucario, which can just kind of steamroll through that deck. And of course, we still have the Hoopa stuff, and I'd rather just play Hoopa. And if you're playing Hydreigon and you go up against Hoopa, you're probably not feeling great. Hoopa's living. It's living an attack from Hydreigon, which is crazy. Maybe not with the Deceptive Needle, but anyway. Okay, so next up, let's get into the Lucario stuff. Let's do all three, because guess what, guys? Lucario is not only the most played deck this season, but there's a bunch of other ways people are playing Lucario, and I feel that all of them are actually really good in my testing. I'll tell you what, in just a little bit, I'll give you some more detail here. But the first one's going to be standard Lucario. This is the one that everyone's sort of playing. In fact, it is the most played deck this season at a whopping sub 9% meta share, but it does have a 51% win rate, which doesn't sound that impressive, but 1,734 wins to 1,547 wins. So that's almost a 200 win differential for Mega Lucario as the most played deck this season. To me, it might not be the best deck in the game, but it's certainly one of them, and it's very, very popular, and definitely deserves to be one of the most played decks. Lots of recent placements, and again, it's because it's good, and people are still continuing to play it. In fact, over this last week, it's seen definitely more play than anything else. Here is a first placed, example from August 10th, which was just a couple of days ago. And this is pretty standard. This is going back to Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee. Again, most of the time it doesn't matter that much. You're either playing Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, or maybe you're playing Bonsly, maybe you're playing Hitmontop, maybe you're playing Sock. There's a lot of leadoff options you can play with Mega Lucario. To me, as long as you're not playing you know, the Greninja version, or as we're going to talk about, Hitmonchan EX, you can all categorize them as just sort of Mega Lucario kind of toolbox type deck list. So here's just a recent example. So many different ways. I don't think it really changes the deck that much. I really don't think so. Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee are really strong leadoff options, which is funny because these are such old cards, but it just doesn't really matter like what else you're playing. Like, you know, any deck in the game would play like the 50 HP to the active basic, but there just aren't really any of those for the fighting archetypes. Like, there's nothing that does that for fighting type other than the EX version of Hitmonchan, which we'll talk about. So Hitmonlee is still very, very good. You know, Hitmontop is like Pheromosa, but yeah, anything that is one of these early game leadoff options for the fighting archetype will have massive implications on its meta viability because Mega Lucario is such a strong back end. It's one of the best sort of back end attacking Pokemon in the entire game. So luckily they haven't given us something too broken for the fighting type to lead off with. But yeah, here's just one example. And again, just an example of what I call, you know, Lucario, right? Just sort of a basic, you know, kind of just fighting type Mega Lucario deck. There's nothing else too spicy about it. Very, very good. Very good. Now, do I want to put this S tier? This is the first deck that I'm really thinking about, like, is this an S tier deck list? And to be honest with you, you know, it's as close as really anything else on this tier list probably will be. There's a couple of things that I feel a little bit more strongly about, but yes, I do think Mega Lucario, it's got to go. Here's the thing, though. You know, here's the thing. You know what? I do really like Mega Lucario, man. It's, you know what? We'll put it S tier. I'm going to put it S tier. It's super popular, but it's so good. It's so strong. Just a really, really strong, you know, deck list this season. And there's a reason why the two decks in S tier or sorry, in A tier currently are in A tier. And that's because they have a strong matchup into the S tier deck, right? So that's how we're kind of valuing decks. This is like the main meta driver currently, the most played archetype. Next up is Lucario and Greninja. So Lucario, because it's so popular, people are playing it a lot of different ways this season. And if we go down, Lucario Greninja is the 25th most played deck. And again, about a 52% win rate, 168 to 144. And this is a really, really strong deck. A lot of these placements more from early on the season. However, it did get first place at a tournament on the 11th, which is why I wanted to mention it. This is actually playing one Chingling, but you could play any of the baby Pokemon that are meta relevant right now this season. There are quite a few of them. And this is just sort of high roll Lucario. And that's just really all this is. If you wanted to play a less consistent Mega Lucario deck, but one that could ultimately beat anything in the entire game, if you wanted to match up a little bit better into the other Greninja / bench damaging decks, this is the deck that does it for you. Again, like a very reminiscent, like Lucario to me has kind of taken over Altaria as that default sort of mega Pokemon that you can kind of build a deck around. Altaria doesn't see nearly as much play as it used to, which is interesting because it is strong into Mega Lucario, but keep in mind, you can play Mega Lucario so many different ways, and to me, Greninja Lucario, certainly also one of the better decks in the game, a lot less popular though. But yeah, basically, like the default mega Pokemon is no longer Altaria, it is in fact Lucario, and that's why there's so many different versions of it. Greninja Lucario is really good. I'm going to be putting this A tier, but I'm going to put it below the Psychic type versions. Definitely really, really solid, a deck that I really like, and one that I think you got to take seriously. It did win a tournament recently, and it's going to be a very volatile deck, but one that's probably going to be pretty decent for grinding ranked battles. Next up is one of my favorite things that I've added here, and this is going to be Lucario and Hitmonchan EX. That's right, guys. Hitmonchan EX is not to be trifled with. It has emerged as so far the 31st most played deck this season, and again, about a 52% win rate. This is a deck that I really, really like. And look at all these placements just recently: the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 10th, the 7th, the 10th, the 10th, the 8th. Now, a couple of these are first place finishes, and they're both from Mega Alana EX. So this is something that we really need to take a look at, and look at this quite seriously here. Hitmonchan EX is absolutely deadly. I got to scroll down a little bit because we're playing Arena of Antiquity. So basically, tons of 50 HP basic Pokemon out there, and Arena of Antiquity is a really aggressive option. This deck is playing Rocky Helmet in one Protected Poncho, one Sabrina, one Cyrus, one Karina, one Arena, and then PCL in here, one X-Speed. So there's a lot of different ways, I guess, that you could build Hitmonchan. I want to pull up this other example to see if it's basically the same, and I think it will be. Yes, it's the same. So again, Hitmonchan EX is in fact really, really strong. in my testing. Now, unfortunately, this is not a deck that's going to be able to deal with Oricorio very easily. But, you know, if you're playing a fighting type deck, you know, you feel pretty confident. Fighting Coach Lucario will be able to one-hit KO Oricorio anyway. But yeah, that's definitely the downside here, is that you're less aggressively strong into an Oricorio lead. But into most other things in the metagame, I feel very good about Hitmonchan. Lots of 50 HP basics, right? Combee's 50, you know, like Litwick in the Psychic type deck is 50, Swablu's 50, Carvana is 50 in Sharpedo. Lots of 50 HP Pokemon that are going to be chilling in the active spot, and that's because not a lot of decks can deal 50 damage, and Hitmonchan certainly can. Now, the other decks, what's interesting about how the meta is progressing right now is that if decks are not playing 50 HP basics that they evolve, they're playing basic EX Pokemon, which they often have in the active spot, things like Hoopa EX, right? So Hitmonchan is incredibly aggressive because with Arena of Antiquity and Karina, you can actually like 2-hit KO, you know, Hoopa EX or Darkrai EX or whatever EX. Like, it's just a really hyper aggressive Pokemon. And oftentimes in the current metagame will live for at least 2 turns. So you can actually just set up Mega Lucario on the back end. Really, really strong. I've been testing this with Bonsly because I actually really like Bonsly and Hitmonchan comboed, because for those 60 HP basics, if you go first, you can actually hit with Bonsly, protect yourself on their first turn going second, and then just retreat into Hitmonchan, attach, and then KO. So 50 plus 10 being, of course, 60. So I actually really like Bonsly compared with Hitmonchan, but in my testing, this feels incredibly strong. Hitmonchan is definitely underrated, I would say, in a deck I feel very, very good about. I'm actually going to put it above Lucario Greninja. Okay, shout out to Hitmonchan. It's very, very good. You guys should play it or try it. Now, here's the thing where Hitmonchan starts to feel a little bit less, you know, a little bit more iffy, and that's going to be these lightning type archetypes, and there's multiple. I actually had to put 3 different Magnezones on this tier list because there's so many different ways people are playing Magnezone, and they're all, in fact, very, very good this season, which to me is a bit of a saving grace, right? That Oricorio and Magnezone continues to be extremely meta relevant. So there's a lot of different options for Magnezone decks. If we go down here, at the 14th most played deck, we have Magnezone and Miraidon, and at the 16th most played deck, we have Miraidon and Magnezone. What's the difference between those, you say? It's whether or not you're playing double Miraidon or single Miraidon. But below that, in the 17th most played deck, is actually Magnezone EX and Magnezone, which actually has a 55.4% win rate, which is the highest, literally the highest in the entire game. So by the way, that's what this one's going to be, okay? So we'll put them all together here. This is going to be a bit confusing, but we have 3 different Magnezone decks. The first one, Magnezone EX, is what we are going to talk about. The 17th most played deck with a 55.5% win rate. Lots of really relevant early placements, you know, relatively early on right now. And this is a deck not playing Miraidon. So this is just classic Oricorio Magnezone. And again, Oricorio is still phenomenally strong right now. Something that is very relevant into a lot of different decks. It not even in the fact that Oricorio can win you games, it's just going to be a Pokemon that can kind of just stop your opponent from being able to progress much in the active, right? And that's the whole concept with Oricorio, is to slow the game down, maybe be kind of a pivot option, maybe just get a 50 damage attack out there. You can commit energies to Oricorio because Magneton can accelerate energies to itself. This is an archetype that is playing one Magnezone EX, and the reason why we're playing Magnezone EX is because so many things in the game can KO Magnezone like somewhat easily, and it's really important, right? So Magnezone EX plus Giant Cape has 200 HP, which means that it's oftentimes able to live an attack from things like Mega Lucario, but Vespiquen as well, even though the normal Magnezone would be able to do that anyway. It's just a really big Pokemon, right? So it gives you kind of 2 different options, whether you want to go Oricorio and Mirror Shot Magnezone or Stormblade Magnezone EX, both really, really valuable options. We can still play Lycia, we can play Clement, Protect the Poncho, Giant Cape, PCL, Lucky Ice Pop. This is a deck that has come back, and it is something extremely relevant this season, or at least over the last couple of days. And again, guys, look at these placements, all right? So lots of recent placements, incredibly high win rate. This is something that we need to take seriously, even though there haven't been that many players playing this deck. I feel very confidently that this is incredibly strong and very, very good. Just incredibly good. Honestly, I might put this in the S tier. That might be a hot take. Again, this is also, I am titling this a ranked tier list, so I feel less confident putting Magnezone as like a ranked deck. But it is certainly still really strong. strong. Unfortunately, I am propagandizing Chandelure, which can handle Magnezone like pretty easily, right? Because Oricorio and Oricorio Violence is kind of crazy. So I'm going to be putting this right here in A tier, and it's very good. I'm actually going to put it above Sleep Altaria. This is, again, just sort of another archetype. It's funny because Chandelure and Oricorio and Magnezone and Oricorio compositionally are almost identical. They're very, very similar deck lists. They just sort of do two very different things, and they're both really good. It's kind of crazy. So anyway, there you go. Very, very strong. But next up, let's talk about the Miraidon versions of Magnezone, which are, of course, still good. The most played version is Magnezone and Miraidon, which is 335 to 303, so a very respectable win rate here. And again, lots of placements, mostly last week. This was a deck that was extremely popular and very successful for like 5 days, like last week, at the end of last week. It was quite good, and it did win a tournament here or there. So it's certainly a deck that we need to respect. I don't really know if I feel as confident about Miraidon in the version of Magnezone playing Miraidon as I do other stuff, but as you'll see, it's still double Oricorio and double Mag, right? So at the core, like that's what's really winning you games right now is Magnezone and Oricorio, which is kind of the throwback, right? No Turbo Miraidon, no Zeraora, just Magnezone Oricorio, just like our forefathers used to play. And it's very good. I'm also going to put this A tier, but you know what? I'm going to put it a little bit below. I'm going to put it just right here. I'm going to segment it out, you know, just very slightly. I think that this is a very, very solid deck, very A tier potential, even for ranked as well. I think Oricorio is actually a lot better for a ranked option than it has been in previous seasons. But next up is going to be double Miraidon. I know we're jumping around a lot. Double Miraidon, which is the 16th most played deck, but it's much lower rather, from a win rate perspective. And here's what I'm talking about. None of these placements are from recent, which is unfortunate. So again, something that's really phased out or been phased out, but this is a version that plays double Miraidon. You know, you're playing Turo, you're maybe playing Zeraora, just a more aggressive deck, one that's just a bit more focused around Miraidon EX as a Pokemon, as an attacking option. Turns out to be more of a liability given the card metagame and lots of bench damage and Cyrus plays. It is strong, but you're still not going to go turn 2 150 on a Hoopa, right? Which means that, you know, you're just not going to be putting yourself in like a great place if you do go early Miraidon. So it's not as valuable this season. Again, not a terrible deck, one that I think is totally fine. B tier is where I'm going to be putting this. In fact, I'm going to put it like right below Great Tusk. I'm actually just going to put it like right here. It's a very fine deck, but there are 2 other better versions, so just don't play this one. Just play either straight Oricorio Mag or maybe just one Miraidon if you don't like Magnezone EX, right? But definitely just don't play double Miraidon. It's not as good. Okay, let's talk about Hoopa. I'm going to skip forward. I'm actually just going to do Dark Hoopa because I think some people are curious about Dark Hoopa at this point in the season. Keep in mind, this is the 3rd most played deck, but it is the highest win rate out of any of the most played decks this season by a pretty wide margin. It has a 53.5% win rate. That's 1337 to 1109. Okay, so Dark Hoopa to me, for my money, is actually the best deck in the entire game. I think this is just the best. I think this is like one of those low Pokemon count, only basic decks, one that we haven't really seen for a while. It's been a long time since we've had just these like 4 Pokemon. They're all basics, and the deck is still super strong, hyper consistent, very aggressive, tons of late game damage, lots of control options. This deck does kind of everything. It does everything, and it does everything quite well. It's a deck that I think I put in S tier last week, last tier list, and I still think that this is by far, I mean, this is, I'm actually putting it above Lucario. I think this is the best deck in the game currently. Like, I feel quite strongly that this is like the best thing that you could possibly playing. And when I was kind of getting to Master Ball and ranked this season, I played in Ultra Ball for like 45 minutes. I played like 11 games with Hoopa, won every single one of them. And I was like, I need to move off this deck because this just isn't even fun for me. It just is too good. It genuinely is just, it's a little too good. And it's funny to me that it's the 3rd most played deck this season because it really feels to me like a 10% plus meta share type deck like tier 0, but not many people playing Hoopa, more people playing Lucario, which is fine. Definitely totally fine. But what about Hoopa and Greninja, right? Hoopa and Greninja. The less common version, it is the 7th most played deck. So again, Hoopa is, I guess, being split up into different archetypes. The 7th most played deck, 3% of the meta. So I guess if you combine Hoopas, it's definitely about 10%. And this is a little bit lower, 630 to 530, so a 52% win rate. Still incredibly good. Most of these placements are from a little bit like longer ago, so more of an early season pop-out deck. I think Dark Hoopa is definitely, you know, taken over in terms of which Hoopa deck you should be playing, but this is still very, very good. Still very, very good. I mean, it's got to be still one of the higher placing decks in the game. You know what? I'm going to put this A tier. I actually kind of like this You know what? I'm going to put it next to Lucario Greninja because I feel similarly about it. In fact, I actually think Hitmonchan Lucario is better, which is kind of funny to me. I think Lucario Hitmonchan is super underrated. In the Magnezone stuff, I think is better, and also I think these Psychic type decks are probably better. Now, all of these decks are extremely close. Like, if you were to be playing any of these decks in A tier, trust me, you will not have any problems climbing in ranked. Keep in mind as well, like, the win rates for the Greninja decks are typically a bit lower because it's more of a higher skill gap deck, which is also why I'm ranking it lower, is because most people playing this won't do as well with them, and they're also less consistent, right? So it's about kind of optimally playing cards in the correct sequence and targeting the right Pokemon with Greninja. There's more in the way for you to win games, but if you know exactly what to do, you know, certainly incredibly strong options. But again, I think that for Hoopa and Lucario, the non-Greninja versions are, to me, S tier, which is why I'm putting their Greninja versions respectfully, like, lower down on the A tier. That's sort of how I feel about that. But next up is going to be an interesting one, and that's Manectric. So Manectric and Heliolisk was a deck I actually put in S tier because at the early on in the season, it was absurd. It was crazy good. But luckily, you know, fighting definitely kept this at bay, and it kind of put it in check. Lots of decks kind of came in and somewhat counterplayed Manectric. And now it's actually just below 50%. Technically, it has 55 ties, but it is technically still above 50%, 1128 to 1087. Still a very strong deck, but look at these placements all early this season, right? So you can see, you know, the time period where we ranked this on the tier list. Last time we were doing the tier list, it was incredibly strong. At this point, though, it has definitely taken a major hit in terms of its, you know, its positioning in the metagame. Nothing's really changed about the deck either. Now, it is very consistent, but Lightning type has gravitated away from being an aggressive archetype and being more towards like an Oricorio kind of mid to late game single prize stuff with Magnezone, which, you know, is kind of what we're used to. It is nice to see other versions of Lightning type decks become meta relevant, but they are a lot more susceptible to counterplay, as we've seen so far this season with Manectric. But things like Oricorio and Magnezone are still phenomenally good, right? So that's the difference there. And Oricorio can hold its own even into, you know, strong fighting type decks like Mega Lucario. This is still a good deck list. I do, in fact, think it's below, though. I think it's pretty solidly below Magnezone. Now, do I want to put it A tier? It would be crazy to go from S tier all the way down to B tier, but you know what? I honestly think we might have to do that just because there are so many decks that I would recommend you play more than Manectric right now, and as we know, Lucario are the most, it's the most played thing, Lucario is. So I'm actually going to be putting this top of B tier. Which is a bit of a fall from grace, but that's the reality of the metagame. You know, when you come out swinging and you win like 5 tournaments in a row, you know, you get counterplayed. And when you take a look at this at the metagame right now, like it's Magnezone or Oricorio and then fighting. Right? It just, there isn't really a lot of room for Manectric. So down to B tier you go. Definitely kind of a bit crazy, but that's how fast things change in the Pokemon Pocket meta. Next up is Venusaur. That's right, Venusaur's back. It is back. People are playing it. If we go down, it is the 30th most played deck. And people have been playing this recently. If you take a look here, all of these are recent results. It got third place recently, a couple of top 16 finishes as well. You know, I like Venusaur. And in fact, I think this is a deck that can hold its own into a lot of different things currently in the metagame. Certainly going to be strong into those, you know, aggressive dark type decks. Mega Venusaur, if you're not playing certain things, like it's really, really easy to lose to it. It is kind of one of those hard checkmate type decks. These sort of big HP / like sustain type decks, like oftentimes like are somewhat good. There's a couple of them on the tier list today, but they're never like top tier meta viability. To me, Venusaur is kind of the grass type version of that. Probably can hold its own into the lightning type archetypes like Oricorio, because you just can't lose to an Oricorio. So that oftentimes ends in a stalemate, but it's really not a losing matchup at all. You can never lose to that, the Oricorio decks. All of the dark type decks I feel very strongly about because you can kind of KO very easily with weakness plus poison. You are in fact KOing a Hoopa, which is a big deal. Things like Darkrai as well. And then into Lucario. Again, like Lucario is not the fastest deck in the game. So when it comes to like a late game positioning, you know, full HP Venusaur can kind of hold its own into a Lucario if you can, of course, maybe utilize Lily, Lucky Ice Pop, Heavy Helmet, all of the tools available to you to potentially live 2 attacks in a row. Not to say that's possible, but it's certainly possible into a lot of things. Maybe not Lucario, but into other things as well. I like Mega Venusaur. It's also always been good into Suicune, which is a really big deal. So there we go. Venusaur, again, a really solid deck. Like a legitimately solid deck this season. It's rising in play. It's 50% win rate, 88 and 88. Probably still B tier for me. I'm going to put it right above Blade. You know what? No, I'm going to put it above Yeah, geez. You know what? I'm going to put it just like right here. It's definitely in that range of Great Tusk, Mega Blaziken, Mega Manectric. It's like totally solid, but just like, I don't know if I'm going to give it like the A tier nod at this point. But there you go. Next up is Dragon Arcana and Rayquaza, a deck list that fundamentally has completely fallen off. Just nobody really plays this in favor of other Mega Rayquaza decks. It's all the way down here at the 29th most played deck, but it does have a very respectable win rate, 130 to 119. But let's take a look here at the placements. Nothing recent. One player got 32nd place at PMPT 41 last weekend, and then a couple of somewhat recent placements, but this is a deck that just nobody's really playing anymore, unfortunately. It's all Gouging Fire, which maybe some people are disappointed about. Again, a very solid deck, probably deserves to see way more play than it is, similar to Drampa. In fact, I think that this on par is actually very close to Drampa in terms of its meta viability, but probably not something that is ever really going to catch on this season. There's just not a lot of reason to play Altaria over some of the other options, right? Even though it is really good. It's just not popular, and it's going to be hard no matter what I say. There just hasn't been enough recent results to really justify it. So I'm going to put it right up here. I'm actually just going to put it right next to Drampa. It's fine. It's totally fine. It's just a good deck. You know, again, anything B tier and above, incredibly solid. So there you go. Shout out to the Mega Rays here that aren't Gouging Fire. We'll get to it in a little bit. Next up is Sharpedo. We still have double Sharpedo decks. We've got Mega Gyarados, and we just have like normal Sharpedo. Sharpedo, and again, an interesting deck that really hasn't seen much play this season after that initial kind of wave early on. Currently, Mega Sharpedo and Gyarados, the non-Mega Gyarados, is the 13th most played deck. I have seen it a little bit unranked, in fact. Now, the difficulty with Sharpedo, similarly to almost every Mega Pokemon, is that it's really difficult to utilize it and then retreat onto the bench without getting brought up later and getting Cyrus for a game. In fact, that's always how I beat Sharpedo. So that's why the most popular version is with Wild Swing Gyarados. Now, if you take a look at these placements, all of these are somewhat old. A couple of placements last week, but it's really been a little while. Other than the 13th, actually, Suicune here did get first place, which is kind of a very important placement for me for Sharpedo, because that to me tells me that this is a deck that in the current scope of the metagame is probably somewhat relevant. It's certainly not as popular as some people might want it to be, because it is water type, you know, but it is good. This is certainly a very solid deck list to me. Now, unfortunately, just because of the nature of Sharpedo kind of coming out early at getting attacked and dealing damage and then wanting to retreat into something else, means that you kind of are forced to play it with Wild Swing, because, you know, if you get Cyrused up later in the game, like, you're going to lose. It doesn't have that much HP. So for that reason, I do think that Mega Sharpedo is quite solid, but this is the only version that I would recommend you play, like by far. And I do think it's really solid. I genuinely think this is a totally solid deck list. In fact, the 13th most played deck with a 51% win rate, I mean, that's like low A tier type stuff. I mean, there's not that many decks I actually consider better than this Sharpedo deck. I'm actually going to put it A tier. I'm going to just put it low A tier because it's not seeing that much play, but a deck I really do respect still. And one of those decks that is genuinely good. It is just a strong deck, but probably should see a little bit more play. But next up is going to be Mega Gyarados in Sharpedo, which is a very different story. So if we go down here, it is all the way down into the 27th most played deck, and it is probably the least successful deck this season, 38% win rate. So just very bad. Relatively speaking. And again, this is a deck that's playing double Wild Swing Gyarados anyway, so it's like, what are we doing here? Recent placement, so 63rd at the TCG Pocket Community Series. And you'll notice also playing double Wild Swing. So it just effectively speaking, if you're going to be playing, you know, Mega Sharpedo, just don't play Mega Gyarados, because it's really not a card that's useful to you. Just play Qianpao, because most of the time when you win a match playing Mega Sharpedo, it's because you're utilizing Qianpao because it's so broken. So yeah, I mean, you know, relatively speaking, this is like our D tier for right now on the tier list. Like, nothing else is going to be nearly as low as this. So there you go. Shout out to Mega Gyarados finding its way into D tier. All right, let's speed it up for these last couple of decks. A lot more decks in today's video than the last tier list we did. But next up is Meowscarada, and I really do like Meowscarada. It's the 20th most played deck this season with a very respectable 50.35% win rate. A couple of recent placements. Look at this, all more recent, right? So it's trending upward, which I do find to be very important. This is a deck from like a week ago or so, which is very standard Meowscarada. I don't think really anything's changed as far as Meowscarada goes. I think it's definitely good still. you know. Now, what I really like about Meowscarada is it's kind of holding it down. It's just a very unique deck list, one that rewards high-level play and skilled players, and a deck that doesn't feel overwhelmingly broken, but feels very respectable. Whenever I lose to Meowscarada, I feel like, you know what? Respect my opponent, and also like it's legitimately, I would say, like one of, if not the most ethical deck in the entire game, which is cool, and it is quite strong. To me, this is probably above B tier. In fact, it's definitely above B tier, but I think it's right kind of lower A tier. I'm gonna put it, you know, just right next to Sharpedo. I'll just put it doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna put it on the lower end of A tier. Certainly a very respectable deck. Most of these decks I would probably play above Meowscarada, but there you go, holding it down for the grass archetype. Vespiquen. All right, I know a lot of people are curious about Vespiquen, so let's kind of hash this out. It is the second most played deck so far this season by kind of a wide margin, 7.5% of the meta share, and it's got just under a 51% win rate. That's 1487 to 1344, so definitely a bit under things like Dark Hoopa and Lucario, but it is very, very strong. I can't remember if I put this S tier on my tier list last week. I think the S tier was Dark Hoopa, Vespiquen, and Manectric, right? So we're coming from an S tier placement realistically. But if you look at these results, most of these are from over a week ago. So this is a deck that I don't nearly feel as confident about right now as I do previously, even though it did win PMPT number 40. And it did open up the season. So a lot of its first place finishes were really early on in the season. In fact, really none of these are that recent, other than third place here at the Plasma Daily. So let's pull this one up. I do like Vespiquen still. It's still a really aggressive deck. It's going to do well into Hoopa. It actually feels quite strong when I'm playing Chandelure, which is unfortunate because I want to play Chandelure. Now, again, I just think it doesn't do that well into Mega Lucario, which is like a big thing here. But you do have access to Fragrant Forest, and of course, like you can deal with Oricorio quite well. In fact, you're kind of forced to deal with Oricorio utilizing the non-EX Vespiquen. But Ogerpon's going to help you a lot into the sleep decks if you do hit it. So, you know, Vespiquen is very respectable, but I really don't feel as strongly that Vespiquen is an S tier deck, just like Lucario and Dark Hoopa is. And again, I think the recent placements kind of do reflect that pretty realistically. I'm going to be putting Vespiquen, you know, I'll put it like at the top of A tier. I'm going to be putting it just like right here. I think Oricorio, Magnezone, even Chandelure or Sleep Altaria are like really, really good decks currently. And I'm going to be putting this like right here. You know what? I'm actually just going to put it at the front because it's more popular, right? So that's probably where it'll go. But probably not though. In fact, I'm second guessing myself. I'm just going to put it like right here. It's just high A tier, definitely solid, but hasn't really won anything recently and suffering from the Mega Lucario dominance, which is happening given the current scope of the metagame. And again, Hitmonchan Lucario is a deck that is almost entirely designed to automatically just beat Vespiquen. Like Hitmonchan Lucario is perhaps the worst matchup in the world for Vespiquen. So, you know, keep that in mind. And also Oricorio, you know, Magnezone can do quite well into Vespiquen as well. So it's very important, right? It's a lot of the things that are seeing more play this season are seeing play because they can beat Vespiquen, right? So that's an interesting thing to note. Next up is Wailord indeedy. It is still a deck. People are still playing this. I don't really consider it to be that high tier. It is the 23rd most played deck. It's about a 47% win rate, 143 to 150. So unfortunately, we're below that 50-50 threshold, which is tough. This to me is a bit of a meme deck. If I wanted to play like a sustained deck, I think I'd rather just play Venusaur because there's just less like steps to it. It just kind of is a better deck. I like Wailord. Unfortunately, like, you know, when you're playing double Misty, like, you know, like you're just not a real competitive deck in my mind. And I think most people would agree with that. Any deck that requires Misty coin flips is probably not anything super substantial into the metagame. Wailord's going to go C tier to me. I'm just going to put it like right here. I'm actually just going to put it like above these two decks. I'm going to put it above Ampharos because no one plays Ampharos, but I'm going to put it below Dragon Box. C tier is hilarious, the variety here in C tier, but you know, relatively speaking, they are strong decks. Next up is Suicune Baxcalibur. Have we really talked about Suicune Baxcalibur? Probably the most underrated deck this season. It is the 8th most played deck, but it does have a very respectable 51% win rate, so it is competitively viable still. It's still hanging around. Nobody's really talking about it. It did get 4th at PMPT 40. Not a lot of recent placements. There was one here on August 10th. A couple actually on August 10th, third and fourth place, which is kind of interesting to me. I think a lot of our people are actually playing Greninja EX recently, so I probably should have added that to the tier list, but maybe something to talk about tomorrow or next week. But yeah, it's Suicune Baxcalibur. In fact, I really haven't seen a lot of this on the ranked ladder, but guess what? I think definitely beat like one or two of the Suicunes that I hit playing Chandelure. And again, a lot of Pokemon right now are kind of floating at that 140 HP range. So Chanpao feels very strong, but just not a lot of 130 HP Pokemon that are seeing play, which is quite interesting. And Suicune will catch that fade. There's a lot, like it'll get KO'd. Like there's a lot of things in the game that will in fact KO Suicune. So that 140 HP, while it did seem incredibly strong at one point or another, feels less strong these days, and Field Blower is pretty common. So yeah, shout out to Suicune, definitely solid, but you know, not that good. Like relatively, I think this is like right middle of the road A tier. I'm gonna be putting it above. Like I'm gonna put it just right in the middle, maybe even below that a little bit. In fact, I actually think Greninja Hoopa is probably better, and Greninja Lucario. So I'm actually just gonna put it down here. I'm gonna put it right next to Sharpedo if I can, if it'll let me. There you go. I'm actually going to put it lower A tier. That's how I'm feeling about Suicune. Honestly, I would rather play any Lucario variant or any Magnezone or Oricorio variant or any Hoopa variant over Suicune Baxcalibur right now, which may sound surprising, but that's the truth. We're 50 minutes in. I told you this would be a quicker video, and I lied. As always, I apologize. Next up, Gouging Fire and Rayquaza. That's right, Gouging Fire Rayquaza, the 4th most played deck this season. It has also stuck around. This is one of those decks that continues to see play, continues to have a very respectable win rate of 51%. However, really not a lot of first place finishes. There was one here on August 11th, and there was one on August 9th. So in fact, I am contradicting myself in saying that. It did win a couple of tournaments recently. So this is a deck that I think is super solid. Probably going to be seeing a decent amount of play throughout the rest of the season and probably into future seasons. It is just sort of the only like true meta viable dragon type deck I think we've ever had. I could be wrong about that. People are going to mention like Flagon or whatever, but like, let's be serious. You know, this is like kind of the first, and I think people are enjoying it. You know, it's not as strong as maybe, you know, it could have been, but it's certainly a lot stronger than it could have been, right? I mean, it's very respectable, very, very strong. And I mean, you're going to lose to it. It's a good deck. And again, I feel very good about it. And this is one of those decks, just like a lot of the decks this season, is just a throw it in A tier and just forget about it existing. I'm going to put it like right here. Yeah, you know, I'll put it right next to Sleep Altaria. In fact, I feel those two are pretty comparable. Right, middle of the road A tier, very good. I don't really have much else to say about it. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's exactly as it was, you know, a week ago, and it'll be that way a week from now, honestly. Next up is the Beautifly Dustox deck. I probably should have removed this from the tier list. I don't think this is something people play anymore. Yeah, it's down here at the 37th most played deck, so people just entirely stopped playing this. I'm wrong, actually. Somebody brought it to Imperium on the 10th and got 17th place, so shout out to them. You know, there's just better single prize archetypes, quite frankly. It's not terrible. It's definitely a deck that's probably done pretty well at some, you know, custom format tournaments. I mean, what are we doing here? What was the win rate? Hold on. What was the 40? Okay, so just below 50%. You know, I mean, it's, you know, we'll put it C. I'll put it below. I'll put it again next to Wailord. I think that's probably just a fine. You know, it's a deck. It's one of the decks of all time. It's going to go just down here into the C tier. Very top heavy this season. That's what it's like, dude. So many strong decks. Let's wrap this up here. 3 more decks. Mega Charizard, which continues to see play. As we'll see here, it is the 11th most played deck this season, and it is the most played fire type deck. And as we know, Charizard decks are almost always are going to be just below 50% constantly. That's where they will always be. It's one of, you know, and I respect Charizard. I really do. I do like this deck, but to me, it's like the ultimate like glue eater deck. And I'm not calling anybody like a bad name for playing this deck. It's just that, like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is like the biggest autopilot, and Charizard has always been like autopilot. It's like, hey, do I draw my cards? You know, like, does my opponent beat me? If not, I'm just gonna attack, and maybe I win, maybe I don't. I don't think there's ever a time where you play this deck a different way. I think you just do the exact same thing every single time. Has been buffed a bit with it by Rainbow Cave. I actually have seen some people on the ranked ladder playing Mega Charizard Y with Berry, just for that one colorless energy. It does come in handy. I don't know about that in terms of if it's worth it. But shout out to Mega Charizard. I mean, come on. It is here. And this is what I was talking about with the fire type stuff. Is like, really, like, the most played fire decks are Mega Charizard Y and Mega Blaziken. Like, Like, it's August. It's August 13th, 2026. Like, what are we doing? This is B tier to me. It's just, we'll throw it right in there. Right. Yeah, I'll put it right here. It's just a B tier deck. It's just right. It's, you know, I'd rather you play Blaziken, honestly. But you know what? I'll put it closer to Blaziken. I'll put it just right there. How about that? You know, just, there's not, it doesn't matter. Does it really matter? It's Charizard. Next up, Sceptile Greninja, which is a deck, the 6th most played deck. So this is actually starting to creep up on Vespiquen. And in fact, I actually kind of think it's like pretty equally as good as Vespiquen. Now, it's less consistent. More of these placements are, you know, from early on this season, but it is very strong. First place here on a tournament from August 6th. It's more of like a high roll Vespiquen deck. As Vespiquen's like better and more consistent, but Sceptile has a lot of benefits. Of course, you're playing Greninja, but also you have more HP, so you don't get 1-hit KO'd by things like Lucario. So it's effectively similar to Vespiquen, a little bit worse across the board, but better into like Mega Lucario specifically, right? Which, you know, to me means that these two decks are somewhat equal, and being a grass type deck gives you so many benefits anyway, just because you can play like, just because you're like, being grass type is inherently strong because like the best things in the game are dark type, it feels like. So yeah, this is a deck everyone's pretty familiar with. Not much has really changed here. I feel like I'm gonna put this just like right here. I'm gonna keep it above Sleep Altaria. I'm gonna put it right below Vespiquen. I feel they're pretty equal. Very, very good. Could easily be a deck that wins the tournament recently or climbs you up the top 100 ranked. Like, it's just a very good deck. Lots of other decks though in A tier, honestly, just a ton. Just so many. But lastly is going to be Zoroark, which unfortunately I think has also kind of fallen. Just anything dark that's not just straight Hoopa, to be fair, just isn't seeing a lot of play. The 22nd most played deck is Zoroark, which is a crazy fall off, but honestly one of the higher win rates, which is kind of crazy here. 231 to 185 is actually very respectable. Only 1% of the metagame. Kind of a mix here. Some results early on, some results like within this past week, so that's interesting. Let's pull up this one here from the 7th, from the TCG Community Pocket Tournament. Also just playing a Hoopa, so I mean, you know, you're cheating a little bit. You're playing Hoopa. At least the Hydreigon deck didn't play Hoopa. I'm kidding. No, I think this is strong. I mean, it's dark is strong. Zoroark is a bit more unique in other ways. I do think like Giant Cape can extend Zoroark and Hoopa out of KO range of Vespiquen, which is interesting. I think Zoroark is just a good card. Grass is still a little bit popular, and unfortunately, we will just still get KO'd by Lucario, so that whole thing's going to be a bit of a struggle. But into most other things, I actually still think Zoroark is very respectable. A very, very good deck. You know what? Do we put it A tier? We kind of have to. I'm just going to throw it. I'm going to put it above Suicune. I'm going to put it just right there. I think Zoroark's actually a good deck, and you should play it. I am going to categorize it a bit better than maybe some of the other dark type stuff, but to be fair, Dark Hoopa is the crown jewel, and to be honest, those are the only two decks in S tier, and I actually feel that that is the truth. I do. And I also feel like I took an hour to make this video, but look how many decks we placed. You know what I mean? Come on, cut me some slack. But yeah, some people are gonna laugh that I put Chandelure at the top of A tier. You could put it over here. It doesn't really matter. It's really good. It's a high A tier deck in my mind right now, given the current scope of the metagame. Yeah, I don't really think anything is really S tier. I think the only two decks that I would really even consider to be S tier right now are Mega Lucario and Dark Hoopa. Those to me are so far and away stronger than like most things. But honestly, like a lot of this other stuff feels almost as strong, right? Like I think Chandelure's got a really strong case right now. Magnezone or Oricorio feels insane. That could have easily been S tier. Maybe these grass type decks, if they weren't kind of feeding off each other, or you know, taking each other's spotlight a little bit, maybe one of those gets pushed S tier. Sleep Altaria could easily come back and just be S tier because of what the metagame looks like. You know, Mega Rayquaza, you know, different types of Hoopa and water type decks and Lucario. All of this stuff is so good. Look at all these decks in S tier, or A tier rather. All of these decks in A tier are exceptionally strong. Any of these decks I would consider to be top tier meta decks. Anything B tier though and below, like I wouldn't really recommend you play them. Like there just are other better options, and that's what's all A tier and above. As I always say on the tier list, C tier, these are decks that are just not really worth your time, quite frankly. And then D tier, which is almost just it's crazy that playing one particular card, being Mega Gyarados, could make this deck so much worse, but it does, in fact. Just do not play Mega Gyarados because it's not a good card, which is crazy to me. But yeah, anyway, there you go, guys. That's my tier list. That's my ranked tier list. This is how I'm feeling about the metagame right now. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. I apologize for this being a shorter video, being under an hour. I mean, it's under, technically that is a shorter tier list video if we are under 1 hour. Go check out pocketmads.com. We got articles. We got really interesting articles being uploaded there. We also just have a bunch of other really useful information, the QR codes for all of these deck lists if you wanted to use them. Go over to pocketmads.com and then go register for PMPT number, where is it? Number 42. PMPT number 42 is this Saturday. Link down in the description below to register. We will be back tomorrow. So the videos this week have been sort of out of whack. Like the best decks for ranked was yesterday. Tier list was today on Thursday. Normally we do tier list Tuesday. Tomorrow is probably going to either be off meta showcase or community deck highlights from pocketmats.com, where you guys submit deck lists to the website and I'm going to feature them. So tomorrow, stay tuned for more interesting decks. It's going to be less meta focused. It'll be more interesting decks, which will be a fun way to kind of wrap this up. And then we go right into the weekend, which I'm excited about. But there you go. There we go, guys. All right, let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys next time. And yeah. Bye.